Well, today I have a fantastic one on That's Classic. I guess you could almost say it's an out of this world one for me. It's a wonderful guest. This gentleman has starred as Ensign Pavel Chekov on all of the Star Trek series, the Star Trek films. He's also an acting teacher, an author, director. He was in Babylon 5 as well. He had a terrific role on there that I hope to talk about as well. And he's just a great guy all around, just a super nice guy. So I just want to welcome Walter Koenig. Hey, Walter, thanks for being on.
My pleasure, John.
This is great. One thing that I wanted to ask you about, I looked through I did a ton of research. And the one thing I'm really curious about is for you, was the role of Chekhov, would you say, hey, it was a great plus for you as an actor, or has it been a bit of a burden too, from a like a typecasting situation? What's your true feeling on that?
It's I've never yes, it's probably been a typecasting, but I've never complained about it. It's never bothered me. It's so difficult for an actor to sustain a career, to keep going for decades and decades, and the fact that it was not the most rewarding role artistically really was a minor consideration. I just loved the idea that I was going to work most weeks, that I had people who were talented that I could play off of, that the stories were well written, and that I had a family. I had a wife and two kids, and I needed to be able to have a sustainable income.
Yeah.
And all of that was part of it. Of course, the celebrity that came with it was disproportionate to the contribution. It's not, I don't say that with humility, I just say it as a fact. That's the way it was. So I feel very lucky in that regard. On the other hand, Babylon 5, which I had a recurring role on, was far more satisfying as an artist. I've been watching it. I didn't watch all of the episodes when I was on it because I was only in a dozen, but I've been watching it since, and I see how well written and how well performed it is, and how well structured, and the stories are riveting. So I'm grateful to Star Trek for Babylon 5, because without Star Trek, Babylon 5 never would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a lot closer to 90 than I am to 80. I feel that I've gotten a pretty good break, and I've been pretty lucky.
Well, I love it. I love hearing that. And then on the other side of the coin, Walter, and by the way, I have a background as an actor, I think, which you and I have talked about. And so I respect that completely because I think that's the break of a lifetime. But the other side is just as your character of Chekhov, did you feel like you ever got closure to the character? As far as, when you finally did like the final, moment with Chekhov, do you feel like you ever got closure for that character?
That's an interesting question, and as a matter of fact, I did address that in some literature that I wrote. My sense was that I was very upset with Star Trek 6, not because it wasn't a good script. It was a good script. It was intelligently written and well performed, et cetera, et cetera. But I felt that the subordinating characters were given short shrift. And we've been with Star Trek. I mean, I've been with it since 1967.
Mm-hmm.
George and Michelle had been with it and Jimmy had been with it since 1966. And I thought there should have been a scene for each of us that acknowledged, our endurance and our loyalty and our continuity, being part of all of this. We should have had a moment or two that really gave you a sense of who these characters were, beyond just being there to help tell the plot. We should have had a scene that told the personality, that gave the audience some depth of feeling about who we were as people. And I was never concerned that my part wasn't big enough. I know that I came on board to be a secondary character, and that didn't bother me. It's not as if I had been, was told I was going to be one of the stars, and then it didn't turn out that way. No, I was just grateful to have the work. But after all these years, 1967 to 2000 and whatever 1990s, whatever it was, the last year with Star Trek 6, there was a lot of time involved there. And we kept coming back. And the audience grew to really care about these characters. Didn't have to make us, didn't have to give us starring roles, but acknowledge that these were not two-dimensional characters, but three-dimensional, and that it wasn't simply an expository device. We weren't there just to say what the plot was, but really to get a sense of who we were, to register our feelings and our beliefs. And that wasn't done. That wasn't done in Star Trek 6. And so I was disappointed, very disappointed, and I kind of overreact. It's who I am. And so, yeah, I saw articles that complained about our complaining, complained about me complaining, that, I should feel just so lucky to be a part of this, that I had no right to feel umbrage. I'm who I am, and that's how I relate, and that's so. Your question is a very appropriate one, and it resonates with me because, yeah, I wasn't a happy camper. I was pleased that the movie was good, that everybody did a good job, that who had a role to play that was worthwhile, but yeah, I was disappointed.
I understand. I do. And by the way, I mean, look, what can I give? I can give the fan perspective, and I can say that I felt the same way in that. I never felt like I got that closure in your character. I agree with you on, the Uhura character, the Mr. Scott, and Sulu. I felt the same way. I did not, and I was definitely a big fan. So I'm glad to hear that. I mean, it's interesting to hear that perspective because, yeah, I do wonder about that both as a fan and as an actor. Did you, by the way, how much say did you have in the character of Chekov? Like, did you write any kind of an actor's bio or anything like that? I mean, yes, I know you say like vodka, that kind of stuff. But did you have a say in it? Had you created any kind of a background for yourself?
Well, that's an interesting question as well, and I don't think I've been asked that before. Um, after we were canceled, and I thought it was done. There was no question in my mind. I didn't think we were coming back. Then we got word that we were coming back, and Gene Roddenberry. This is the first time I've ever discussed this, so you're getting something new here. Gene
Great.
Roddenberry wrote a biography about all the characters when we come back. What our function would be. but the word hour is actually a misnomer because the only one he didn't write about was Chekov. He wrote about everybody else, but he didn't write about Chekov. And there was two reasons for that. One, I'll never know. It just didn't make enough of an impression, I guess. And two, they were really considering not having Chekov because the story would have put the timeline like 5 years before we actually had done the series. Okay. So, and we were already about 5 or 6 years since we had done that series. And I was playing a character who I was 9 years older than. So all of a sudden you put the 9 and the 5 and the 5, you got 19 years, and I'm supposed to be 19 years younger than I actually was. So I didn't get an invitation. However, later on, they, as you probably know, they had all sorts of discussions behind closed doors, and they ultimately changed the whole format. And at that juncture, I was being included. So my point is, and I'm being incredibly talkative here without saying anything important. I emailed Gene and said, look, we could do this with Chekov. We could make him a security guy. And his main task is protecting Captain Kirk, which would be a very comic kind of thing to do. Mm-hmm. Chekov, who was physically, much smaller and not as physical as, not as strong as Captain Kirk, but I'm the guy in charge of taking care of him. And I thought we wouldn't have to add a lot of dialogue. It's just that every once in a while we have a scene where he's in danger and I try to help him. And we could have it so that I screw it up, for that matter. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, I did propose that idea. Never heard from them. So that's the end of it.
If you want to get in on the fun of That's Classic, go to my merchandise store. You can get a t-shirt, a mug, or a variety of items. The QR code is right here on the screen. That'll take you right to the site, or I'll put it in the description below the video. Have fun, enjoy. Let's go back to the interview. So that was great. That was very interesting. So did you, another thing that I was curious about, did you actually, in essence, audition for Chekov? Because I know Gene Roddenberry remembered you from his series, The Lieutenant. And so and then I also heard, though, you were brought in because of, I just blanked out, Pevney, Joe Pevney. And so my brain, I'm just trying to wonder, what's the true story? Like, how did you get brought in for the audition for Chekov?
Well, it's speculation on my part as well. Yes, I did do an episode of the Hitchcock series, and Joe Pevney was the director. And Joe Pevney thought I was great, and he kept telling me I was. And I blush when I say this, but he kept telling me I was going to be a star, So I definitely had his support. I don't know if Gene remembered me from The Lieutenant or not. Yes, I did the show, but other than perhaps meeting him initially on my first interview, I don't ever remember him being on the set or anything else. And at the beginning, I had a little bit of difficulty with both the director and the lead actor, whose name is who was the lead actor?
William Shatner?
No. I'm the lieutenant.
Oh, Gary Lockwood.
Gary Lockwood. Yeah. I remember very distinctly. It was a leading role, and I had done a few leads, but they were for some reason concerned, and they both started giving me notes before I even got the bloody words out. And I told the director, please don't do that. you're not getting my best performance if you're telling me how to do it. Let me give it a shot. And if you're not happy with what I'm doing, then correct me. And I told Gary Lockwood the same thing. I said, actors don't do this. And he was the lead on the show. I said, actors do not tell other actors how to play a role.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's verboten as far as I'm concerned. And so he stopped, the director stopped, and the show went on, and it all worked out. So it was fine. But there was only one other actor who read for the role. Only one other actor who read for Chekov.
How?
Because the casting director, whose name was Joe DiAugusta, he had cast me in several episodes of a series called Mr. Novak, in which I played different characters. I played a rabble rouser. I played a guy who emotionally collapses in the principal's office and confesses to doing something terrible. It was the second guest role, but a very good role. And I also played a Russian. I played a defecting Russian student. So Joe DiAugusta is one who brought me in. And I guess it was one of those, wonderful coincidences that happened where several people knew my work, to begin with. And even then, after I read the role, they weren't pleased because the role very, very definitively was of a scared guy whose ship is about to blow up. And I mean, there's only one way to interpret that and not be, doing a total caricature. And the way to interpret that is Captain, the ship is about to blow up. What are we going to do? And they weren't satisfied with that. Not because it wasn't accurate, but because they weren't looking for that. They were looking to see if I had a sense of humor. Because they wanted to, it gave me these lines. So I ended up saying, Captain, guess what? The ship is about to blow up. They loved it. That's how I got the role. It's a bizarre business we're in,
That is a really bizarre one. Wow. Okay. So that's interesting then, because you had Roddenberry, obviously, in the room. You had Joe Pevney, who, knew you as well. Then you've got Joe DiAugusta, or I think that's right,
Right.
who cast you. A lot of different angles on how this came together. Very, very interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. And do you have any sense of who that other actor was? Did you see him or anything? Did you happen to see who the other actor was?
Yes, I knew the other actor. I didn't know him well, but we had competed for roles on different shows. And in fact, we played opposite each other in one show. It was a series called Jericho.
Huh.
And we were French resistance fighters. This was in the 70s. We were French. No, it couldn't have been in the 70s. It had to be before Star Trek. Yeah. So about like 65 or something. And we were French resistance fighters. And he was a hot actor. He worked an awful lot. He was the guy people went to first. And then they thought of other people who could play juveniles after that. Wow. So yeah, whatever I don't know what happened behind closed doors, but obviously it worked to my benefit. Worked to my benefit.
The other thing that I saw that I thought was interesting too is you're out there, they bring you in, that you go through all this, they like you, the other guy goes in, whatever, you're out there waiting. And we were talking about closure with Chekov. I felt like they never gave you a closure that you got the role. I mean, it sounded like you didn't even, like they never even came out and said, hey, by the way, you got it. It's yours. I heard you were waiting out in that waiting room and they never actually came out. That somebody, I think it was somebody from wardrobe actually came and just grabbed you.
Quite true. The sun set while I was sitting in that room waiting. I mean, I was there for a couple of hours, and there was no, they had all left by a different door and neglected to have anybody tell me that I
What?
had the room. So I'm just sitting there, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. Finally, the wardrobe gentleman came in and said, "Come with me." And that's the way he was. So I, like a little puppy dog, I went with him. We went to wardrobe. My hand to God, this is true. He dropped to his knees, put his hand on my crotch, and I said, "What are you doing?" He had a tape measure in the other hand. I didn't see that. He used it to measure crotch to seam because he said, "Well, I have to make you a costume, don't I?" And that's when I found out. That's how I found out. Now, those were the words he used. I have to make you a costume. That's how I found out I was on Star Trek.
Oh my gosh,
It's a
too
it's a
funny.
crazy business. And it's amazing that we survive it at all.
It's incredible. It's totally incredible. That's really wild. So what is the story, by the way, too? I know that the monkeys were big, and I know Davy Jones was big, but what was the idea that they had to put a wig on top of you? I mean, you weren't the oldest guy in you were a young guy. I was kind of surprised.
Well, I did read some correspondence between Gene and his staff. So this is almost verbatim, and it's definitely accurate. He said, "Let's bring in a new character who will appeal to the kids. We don't have somebody like that. Somebody," and he said, "somebody like the guy on the Monkees."
Hmm.
I don't even think he mentioned his name, but he was referring to Davy Jones. So that's what they were doing. They put out some publicity that the Russian news agency complained that we didn't have a Russian and the Russians were the first in space. That's bullshit. That never happened.
Hmm.
Um, that was just manufactured by the studio. The fact that they were looking for somebody who would appeal to the preteens, people from 8 to 14, that age group, that is accurate. And that's how it, and so I had short hair. I had just finished shooting my own film and I had short hair.
Hmm.
And so they decided to get me a wig. And we went to Max Factor, which was a store up on Hollywood Boulevard
Mhm.
that specialized in women's cosmetics and hair products, etc. And we tried on, well, we actually brought back about 4 or 5 different wigs, a blonde and a red and a brunette. And I tried them all on. And then after I tried them on, they all tried them on. What am I getting into here? But yeah, so that's how that happened.
Wow, I'll be darned. Yeah. That's interesting. Now, the other one too that I find interesting is George Takei. I think I got that right, the way I say that. George Takei was in the Green Berets during the time you come on. So he's not there, and he comes on, and I heard, in what I read that there was a little bit of like angst there because you two had to share a dressing room. You were kind of coming in on his part or something like that. What was the energy like then?
Well, that's what he said. I never felt that. But I'm a relatively sensitive guy. I mean, sensitive to how people feel about me. And I never got the feeling that he was uptight or that he was upset. I mean, he probably did feel that, but he never revealed it and it never made me feel uncomfortable. We got along well, I thought. So he's a true professional. I mean, he might have been upset, but it never got in the way of his work.
Interesting. Were you in the dressing room? Was it just you and George, or was James Doohan in there as well?
No, no, we had to, yeah. See, it's a crazy business with crazy rules, some of which are written and some of which are unwritten. You know, everybody who's a regular on a television series has their own dressing room. I mean,
Hmm.
that's just the way it is. It's not written in the contract necessarily, but that's the way it's always been. Well, they didn't have enough dressing rooms, initially. So we shared it. It didn't matter to me. I was so grateful just to have a job to go to every week. It didn't bother me, but I guess it bothered George, and I can understand it. The year before, when he did the first season of Star Trek, he had his own dressing room. So suddenly he was perceiving this as a demotion. It didn't last very long. I don't remember how many episodes we did sharing the same room, but it wasn't all that many. And ultimately, we all had our own.
Gotcha. And the thing that obviously all Star Trek fans always hear about is this, between William Shatner and the cast. And what was your the first time that the first day you walk on the set, you're on Star Trek, what was your first, I guess, impression of William Shatner? Had you ever met him before or anything like that?
Tell me exactly who was William Shatner? Who did he play? Look, I felt just so grateful to be there, to be on the set. That I certainly wasn't starting out by complaining that Mr. Shatner didn't acknowledge me. Uh, I, he was the lead, and that was the way things pretty much were in the 60s. It's a whole different environment. Um, you know, when they came out with Next Generation, everybody got a shot. There were episodes for everybody, not every episode, but each of the running characters got a chance to take center stage for part of the show. Well, that wasn't the way it was in the 60s. In the 60s, it was you had the three or two or whatever it was main characters, and then you had the supporting characters who were there for, at best, color, at best just to bring some sense of environment to the show and to be expository, to help relate the plot without actually getting their input into what it all meant, you know. And that's the way it was. And I accepted it. I never thought that I was supposed to be the lead, and I never complained about it. I got a little bored because I do have an ego, and I do feel that I'm capable of perhaps more than I was offered. So I don't know how much of your audience knows this, but I left the show in the third season. I left for a month to do a play. I did a play with Jackie Coogan, who played opposite Charlie Chaplin in The Kid or The Champ or whatever it
It
was
was the
called.
kid. It was the
The
kid.
Kid, yeah. And it was a wonderful month. We did it just outside of Chicago. It was great to work with. It was really a fun month. And I didn't miss not sitting there on the Enterprise Bridge and saying, "Aye, aye, Captain," because that's what it meant. But by that point in the third season, we were pretty well sure we weren't going to be picked up. So there wasn't a great deal of enthusiasm. We were probably going through the motions,
Hmm.
pretty much. Um, yeah. So I don't know what was your question.
Oh, does it even matter? It was about William, the first time you met William
Oh, what
Shatner.
William Shatner? Yes.
Yeah.
So I had I just accepted it, as the way it was. I didn't know that anybody else. I mean, I accepted it. I was a little disgruntled that I couldn't get him to say good morning. Um, and I was thinking back. It's curious. I was thinking back about. I did one scene, and I really don't know if I'm imagining this or whether it really happened. But I'm imagining, or I have in my mind that Shatner walked by me and said, "Nice job." Now, I don't know if it actually happened or if I fantasized it because I needed that support, that reinforcement. But
Wow.
I don't know, but it happened. It may have happened once, but other than that, we would. And now I'll tell you another thing. So those three guys were always together. Now Leonard had his own shtick going, and Leonard's shtick was he was Mr. Spock, and he was Mr. Spock on the set and off the set.
Hmm.
He did not communicate, not with us. He communicated with Bill and DeForest. But and evidently he even brought it home, and there was some friction at home because he was Mr. Spock at home.
Oh,
So
wow.
I didn't anticipate. I didn't, nor did I take exception to the fact that I barely had any conversation with him as well. It was different. With him, it was because of his character he was playing. With Shatner, it was because those were the times, and that's the way he felt that you act. You're the star. You have a rapport with the other stars, but the other folks who are on the set, you don't need to worry about them. However, now this is an interesting thing that, again, I haven't spoken about very often. So I would watch three of them, and they were kidding around and laughing and joking. I said, Jesus, I wish we were in on the joke. I wish we were considered part of the team, and we weren't. But I said I accepted that. Okay, that's the way things are. But big but, I did a game show with Bill. I mean, a game. We did a game where we played our characters. It was Bill, me, and George. And then we were in the Next Generation movie, and it was Bill, me, and Jimmy. And the whole thing changed. Now that I'm next to him, now that I'm not just a guy sitting pushing the buttons, it was the same. We were joking and kidding around. And I realized it had more to do with my station than who I was.
Huh.
Now I'm more of an equal. I mean, we were trading dialogue on a one-on-one basis in the game and in the Next Generation, the first part of the film. So that's why he acted the way he did.
That's interesting. And how did, the other side of that coin, how did that make you feel when you were, so to speak, on the same level with him and he saw this different side of him? What did you feel inside? Were you kind of in shock, or were you feeling, wow, it's nice to see
It
it?
took me a while to understand it. It took me a while to understand it. I didn't understand how he could be this way and then that way. And it was long past my doing those films, those projects, the game and Next Gen, that it finally dawned on me that that's how you reconcile the inconsistency in behavior. We were the station, our stations had changed.
Mm-hmm.
Our positions had changed. I mean, he was still the captain, but I was much more his equal,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the scenes that we did. So yeah, but I think it was years afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
before I understood it.
Well, I've got to tell you, just along those lines, I saw the Star Trek for the Voyage Home recently, and it kind of makes me chuckle even more listening to what you had to say just now. Is in that moment where you're on the gurney and you're waking up, and DeForest is like Chekov, whatever, and then Captain Kirk is like, you know. Pavel, can you hear me? Whatever. And you say your name, and then he says rank, and you go, Admiral. And now it really hits home because it's kind of an inside joke there too. It's kind of
Yeah,
like, I'm on your level. I love that.
that was a fun movie. That was very rewarding. I loved being in that movie. I, That and of course Star Trek 2 are the two that I hold dearest.
Oh, the two of my favorites. And honestly, you were talking about like your involvement and your depth. I thought, and maybe this is just me on the outside, but honestly, I thought that your character had some of the most like influential scenes in those movies versus some of the others. I was like, oh wow. I mean, there was some depth there. I mean, you had that whole moment, obviously, in Voyage Home with the nuclear. Uh,
And we can thank Nick Meyer for that.
oh,
Nick
really?
Meyer, uh, even though I don't think he got credit on Star Trek 2, he gave it up. He really wrote a lot of that movie, but he gave it up to Harv Bennett. I guess, I don't know what, political friendship, whatever it was. So Chekhov's involvement was a direct consequence of what Nick Meyer wrote for the character. In fact, he had a couple of other scenes that he wanted to do. One where I was shooting craps on the street in Star Trek 4.
Oh.
We didn't get to shoot that, but it sounded like a lot of fun. I joined some street guys and we were shooting craps.
That would have been a blast.
Yeah, yeah,
By the way, the other one that I saw, you had actually either written or suggested a scene for George with his like great, maybe
yeah.
that's too many greats, grandfather. And I was wondering, was that supposed to take place? They're walking down the sidewalk and you see this Asian family come out of a door, and the scene doesn't really go anywhere really. They kind of cut. Is that where they were going to put that in, or what was that all about?
Well, George came to me and said, Walter, what do you think of this? And he had a scene where a little kid stops him because of the clothes he was wearing and says, why you dress so funny? And and I said, wait a second, George, what if we made the little kid your great grandfather?
Wow.
And when you start talking to him, that becomes apparent. So it's more than just the costume you're wearing. There's a whole, bond between you. There's a relationship. He said, "Oh, that's good." So he brought it to Harv Bennett. Bennett said, "Yeah," and unfortunately, and this is again the business. I can pull moments out of my life that are so reflective of the capriciousness of movie business
Hmm.
and film business, and just in general. The kid was a monster. He was about 7 years old. No, I don't want to. I don't want to. And he just wouldn't shoot the scene.
Oh,
And they kept asking him, and Leonard asked him, and everybody asked him, no, I don't want to. When they finally decided to use his brother, who was older, it wasn't as appealing, but it was like 10 or 11. The kid said, okay, I'll do it. By then, we had lost the son,
oh,
so we couldn't shoot it. And we never got, and that was on the street, and we never got back on that location to shoot it. So he lost it.
oh.
He didn't, George didn't know that we weren't coming back. I knew. I couldn't bring myself to tell George, to be the one to tell him that they weren't going to shoot that scene. And that would have been, up until that point, that certainly would have been the best moments he had on Star Trek, if indeed, or maybe the one where he's dueling, but certainly in terms of the films. So, yeah, that was lost.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were talking earlier about closure for your character or something like that. That would have been a moment of a little bit of closure in there with Sulu. That's boy, that's a shame. I mean, as a fan, I'm like, wow, would that have been a moment to remember?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Did you ever submit story ideas during the original series?
No, no. I didn't start writing anything until after we were canceled. And then I started sitting down and I wrote a novel. 1969, when we weren't picked up and the phone did not ring. I had
Mm.
absolutely no opportunities. Uh, I thought I was going to go nuts if I didn't have something to do and a reason to get up in the morning. You
Hmm.
know, other than to feed my baby, his bottle or whatever the hell was going on. So I made it a point that every morning I pack up a pen and paper and go to the library and I would write. I
Hmm.
was writing, longhand. And that gave me a purpose. It gave me an objective. And I needed it desperately, just to get through the day. And that, according to who you talk to, it was either the most terrible novel ever written, or it could be published. I had two writers who worked on Star Trek who said you can get this published.
Hmm.
And I had one writer who was the most famous of them, named Harlan Ellison,
Oh
who
yeah.
told me this was terrible. He said it was terrible. It didn't work. Forget about it. And of course, you listen to your worst angels,
Hmm.
and I had so much respect for Harlan's talent that I put it in the drawer, and it sat in that drawer for 18 years. Somebody, again, this crazy capricious business. Somebody wanted to read it, and it got sold to a small publishing company. Uh, they published it. Another small publishing company picked it up. They published it, and then a third small publishing company published it. So I probably have the most published novel with the fewest circulation in American history. Um, yeah, and we ended up making a radio drama out of it
Hmm.
with 40 actors. I flew to Massachusetts with my wife. We had 40 actors playing the different roles, and we did it as a radio drama, and it played on the that radio station that's up in the sky. What's it? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I do. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. And for the life of me now, I can't think of the name.
The very tall, lean comic had his own show on that station. He was
Ah,
a very
it's blanking out on me. I'm sorry.
okay.
I
All
don't
right.
have it. I'm usually really
It
good, but
blanks
boy,
out
I'll
on
tell
me
you,
all the
I
time.
get it too. I can't think of, my
Mhm.
brain won't go there. Hey, tell me this. Thinking of Star Trek, I've heard that, yes, the three of them were very tight, DeForest, Leonard, and William Shatner. However, I also heard that between Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner, there was literally like a fight sometimes for who had the more lines. Is there any truth to that?
Evidently, yeah. I didn't know what was going on between them. I heard Leonard once on the phone uh, talking to one of the executives saying that he was going to take off his ears and go home unless the dialogue was changed or something like that. I know that Bill visited at least one writer uh, and um, suggested that they build up his part a little bit better.
Wow.
Um, so there was competition, and there was some ill feeling during the series, and they were both, bending Gene's ear, and Gene had to deal with all of that. Uh, but that they became close friends when they started making the movies. I rushed to add that because I don't want to give the impression that there was a lot of hostility
Hmm.
until there was. And about four movies into the Star Trek saga, um, Bill approached Leonard about doing a documentary about him, and Leonard said no, he didn't want to do it, and Bill did it surreptitiously, and kind of got shots of Leonard when he didn't know it. And Leonard got furious, and then their relationship just died.
Wow.
It was probably more than four. It was probably the fifth or sixth, or maybe even after we finished shooting this series. It could have been after we finished shooting this series that this happened. But it was unfortunate because they had a really strong bond, but Leonard was very, very upset. Um, and I get that. I get that. Um, you know, I think if somebody did a screenplay about Bill's life, you know, they don't have to call him Bill Shatner, but an actor, and the ups and downs and the triumphs and humiliations that were involved. I mean, Star Trek V lambasted and ridiculed. I mean, the lauding, the applause far exceeded the negative stuff. But what a contrast and what a thing to live through and to survive. Extremely interesting story because he's lived an extremely interesting life, I think.
I agree. I think he has too. One of the things that I was curious about too is, by the way, before I forget this, I got to tell you, I saw this and I was blown away. It did not make any sense to me. So, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, you obviously have a very pivotal part in this, in this movie. And they go to, I believe, I don't know what it's called in Russia, but it's whatever their movie academy is or whatever that is. And William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy go there to, because they're sent by, I guess, Paramount to go premiere it there. And I'm thinking to myself, why would they not take you as well? Because, I mean, not only are you Russian, but your character is the Russian character in the movie. And am I right? You did not get to go to that?
Yeah, that's right. I just wasn't important enough. I wasn't the star. You want to know the truth? I thought they should take me. You know, I thought it would be great if they, and evidently, from what I heard, and this is secondhand, the Russian audience was very positive about Chekov. That's what I heard. That's secondhand. So I don't know if it's true or not. But somebody told me that. Yeah, that would have been nice, but I was just too secondary. I was just, I guess to be considered. I'm speculating. I don't know. I mean, they got the two leads. That was enough. That's what they needed. But I would have loved it. I actually ended up going to Moscow years later, but ironically, not as a result of Star Trek, but a result of Babylon 5.
Huh.
And the reason was Star Trek was being shown late night in the Soviet Union. Babylon 5 was prime time. And so I was invited by a group of fans to come to Moscow and St. Petersburg and make an appearance there at those places as a result of my work on Babylon 5. So I got to go, years later, and it was great. They were just terrific. Everybody was just so reinforcing and so positive. It was just a great experience.
Oh, it had to be. I'm sorry, but that's a long time coming. That's just crazy. The fact that, by the way, I was thinking about this too. Your parents were Russian immigrants. What was their, I mean, I don't know, excuse me, I don't know when they passed or whatever, but were they around when you were doing the Chekhov role?
John, you ask some very salient questions. It's questions that have not been asked of me before. Yeah, I'm very pleased that you asked me that. The answer is my mother was still alive. My father had passed away. Both my parents were from Lithuania, and they spoke Russian and Yiddish and German My father spoke about 5 languages. He spoke Polish, he spoke some French. We ended up going back to Europe when I was 6 months old because he was working for RCA Victor as a language consultant, translating. But I would have loved to have my father had seen me play Chekov. Oh, that would have been such a thrill for me because the truth of the matter is he was a dyed-in-the-wool commie. he, he was a commie from the word go. We were investigated by the FBI. We were never called in, but everybody in our apartment house was questioned about us because he was also very verbal about it. This was not, there was nothing underhanded or behind closed doors. He was out there talking about the glories of communism. He left when he was about 11. So what did he know? You know, but he brought with him this whole sense of how great the Soviet bloc was as a consequence of their political beliefs. He voted always for the most liberal Democrats. He voted for Henry Wallace, who was actually a Republican, but was very, very liberal Republican. He voted for Roosevelt. But, you know, when they started interning the Japanese Americans, he felt we were next. He felt that we were going to go next, and we were going to be put in camps. So around 1954, he thought that we should consider moving to Canada. We didn't do it, and that never happened. But when I say we, I'm talking about Russian Jews, you know.
Sure. Wow. That's really something. That really is. So what was your mother's reaction then when you were cast as Chekhov? And you know, what was your feeling? Did she ever say anything to you?
Who?
Your
My
mom?
mother?
Yeah.
I think she did. I think that she was pleased. She was never as passionate about politics as my father was. But she was pleased to see that I was working, you know, that I was working as an actor. That made her happy. She passed away when Star Trek, the movie, was just being released. So she was too ill to go to see that. So she only saw the episodes. But she was proud of me, you know, as mothers will be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I'm glad that she was around. I mean, it's a shame about your father, but it's cool that you would, you know, have a strong enough sense to know how he would feel about you. I think that's pretty neat, you know. What about you know, going forward, did Anton Yelchin, I believe his name was, or yeah, I want to say Yelchin, but I think it was Anton Yelchin who played the only other person that's ever played Chekhov, and unfortunately he had a terrible demise. Did you ever get the chance to talk to him about the character, or you know, have a
I
one-on-one with
did. I did. The director invited me to come watch them shoot the new Star Trek. So I came down there, and Anton wasn't actually working that day, but somebody called him. I think it was, what was his name? The director's name?
J.J. Abrams?
J.J. Abrams called him and said, "Would you like to meet the original Chekhov or something?" And he drove down from Malibu, and we sat and talked for a couple of hours. Delightful young man, very bright, very talented, um, almost differential, which was always made me a little uncomfortable, but it was still nice, you know. And I thought we got along superbly. And yeah, and and I don't know if I told him or not, but I said, although it was flattering that you tried to do my accent, or you did my accent, I said, you didn't need to. You could be your own person the whole way. My God, you are Russian. You were born in Russia. You don't have to do this pretend accent that I have been criticized about from time to time. But the final moments that we had together was I was invited to the premiere. When it was, I think it was Chinese theater in Hollywood, and I went with some hesitation, some reluctance, because I didn't know how I was going to respond to seeing other people doing Star Trek. I felt that I was just petty enough to take exception to other people playing the characters we played, and particularly somebody playing Chekov. And I thought, you know, this could tell me that I'm an asshole. I just probably have to cut that out. I don't know.
Ah, it's
But
fine.
so I sat down, prepared to really dislike it, and I didn't. I really liked it. I liked everybody, and I loved Anton, and I was so flattered that he did the V's and the W's. I just thought, you know, how neat. He didn't have to. He would have been, you know, at least as successful if he did it his own way. But I just thought it was a very entertaining film. Everybody was very good, and I was so appreciative that we were still acknowledged in some way. Now, as we were leaving, there was a party held in a parking lot, a huge party. We had to drive a few blocks. This was an after film party, and all the actors, they're all in the lot, and each one has their coterie of fans around them, mostly newspaper people, journalists, and photographers. And Anton had a group of people around him, and I couldn't have even gotten close to him, but he saw me in a distance, and he yelled, "Walter, Walter, I've got my own Chekov doll." Attaboy! You've made it, kid.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So what that's funny. Going back to the to Khan, by the way, the Wrath of Khan, which I thought it's honestly, I think it may be my favorite Star Trek film.
Sure.
What was that like to work with Ricardo Montalbán and Paul Winfield? I mean, both very iconic in their own way. What were they like on the set, and what was that like for you to work with these people?
Well, I had met Paul before. I had gone on a double date. My wife was a friend of the woman who he was seeing.
Hmm.
So we went on a double date. He was very quiet, almost taciturn. So I accepted, okay, that's who he is. And actually, things didn't change a lot when we made the movie. We
Hmm.
had a couple of, I mean, we talked and we were pleasant to each other, but I didn't feel any relationship building. In fact, we had a bet. He referred to us as Mutt and Jeff, but he got it wrong because Mutt was the tall guy. Everybody assumes that Mutt was the little guy. So we had a bet. I knew my comics.
Oh
I
yeah.
had a comic collection that goes back to 1896
Wow.
with the Yellow Kid. Yeah. So I won the bet, and the money went to a charity. I don't remember what charity, but I told him to. Anyway, Ricardo, oh God, that was such a difficult. No, it wasn't. It was great. Ricardo was wonderful. It was just so much fun to be around. He was he was such a professional. I remember almost the very first moment. We had rehearsed the first scene on the soundstage on Star Trek II. And then Nick Meyer called us all into his dressing room to critique what we had done. So we were all sitting there, Ricardo as well. And he turned to Ricardo and he said, you know, what you're doing is a little big. It's a little over the top. And I thought, oh my God, we're going to have such a scene now.
Yeah.
So I was, I was appropriating my feelings about how Mr. Shatner would have reacted. So I was expecting the worst. And Ricardo looked at Nick and said, I see what you mean. I was floored. This was a movie star. This is a
Wow.
guy who had been in feature films for years. So that gave me a sense of who I was going to be working with. And he was just delightful, charming, cosmopolitan, kissed the ladies' hands, everybody's hands. That was his chest, by the way. People
Really?
asked me that was his chest. Yeah. He was just a delight. I I really I had written the screenplay, an American who comes off the reservation to look for the body of his dead son for a formal Native American burial, and I thought I was having trouble getting it made, and in fact, I never did get it made. But I gave it to him to read, and he called me and said, "I think it's wonderful, wonderful." Pause. Does he have to wear old clothes? That's what he was concerned about. He
Wow.
had he had played that character in the white suit, you know.
Hmm.
He didn't want to wear it. Anyway, no, Ricardo was great. I thoroughly enjoyed, everybody enjoyed working with him. There was not a moment that was unpleasant.
Where did it's so
And
funny. Go ahead.
what?
No, go
No, I was
ahead,
just going
please.
to say, I recently saw Star Trek 2 again, and yes, it was a, a it wasn't not a normal delivery kind of performance. He was very big, but that was character. That was his character. I never felt that it was he was overacting. I felt that this is who this person was, quoting Shakespeare and walking around with his chest out. It was all part of who he was, and it made sense to me. And this is an interesting thing that everybody who wants to write should bear in mind. This is one thing that I'm going to say that you can take as a truth about writing. When you write characters that are the bad guy, you write a protagonist and you write an antagonist, you know, and our screenplay just covered that so well, and Ricardo as the antagonist. But what made it so effective was he wasn't a machine. He wasn't a crazy animal with lots of hair. He wasn't an alien. He was a human being. Yes, he was a very powerful, uh, potent human being, but he was a human being. And as a consequence, even though you hissed and booed him, you could identify with his feelings. That
Hmm.
his wife had died. That's something we could all relate to.
Hmm.
We could all relate to losing somebody you cared about. So even though you wanted them to fail, you at the same time could understand where he was coming from. And
Hmm.
that was terribly important to make the villain a dimensional character.
I agree. You do. You feel for him. It's not like you just you have this tremendous hate for him. You really do feel for him. By the way, and I'm not just, this is just BS or whatever, but I think it's also one of your greatest performances in the Star Trek world or whatever. Did you have to, I know you have a great background. I know you went to Neighborhood Playhouse and all of that, but for that moment, especially with I never can remember what it's called, but the little worm that, they stick in your ear.
Ceti Eel, the Ceti Eel,
Wow, that was pretty good.
Ceti,
CT.
Ceti, Eel. Yeah, Ceti.
Okay,
What about it?
CT. CTEL. Um, where did you go like as an actor for that? Because you do quite a moment there. I mean, as an actor, where were you going to do that? What was going through your mind?
Just ask anybody in the audience who's, got squeamish about it. I mean, everybody can relate to something crawling into your head
Oh,
that you don't like. It didn't require a lot of imagination. I put that thing in my ear and I knew what that would feel like. At least I had a sense of what it would feel like. We ended up shooting that two separate occasions. We shot it on the set, the sound stage, with Paul Winfield standing beside me, and we're going through that. And my screaming. But post production, I went up to Light and Magic near San Francisco,
sure.
George Lucas's company, and they put me on a table that was covered in the same material that the floor was in the cave. They had a guy under the table. They drilled a hole in the table that I was lying on, and they put the creature in my ear, and it was attached to a very fine filament. And the guy under the table pulled it out, and so it came down my face.
Oh,
Now they shot it that way with the thing that was that big, and then they shot it with a sculpture of my ear with a much bigger orifice, so they could get a much bigger looking eel.
wow.
So there was two shots at it. One with a little thing that they pulled on a string, and the one that wasn't my ear and wasn't the original Ceti Eel, but was the sculpture of it. So you could get a chance to see how revolting it was.
Yeah, no kidding. When you were on the table even, and the guy's pulling it out, was it kind of creepy? Having that
I
coming
just thought it
out.
was great fun. It was so much fun being on that side of a situation like that, where I wasn't watching a horror movie with a poor victim, where I was the victim. My grandson, who's now 17, has been dating a very cute little girl, and they were talking about horror movies, and she said to him, "I saw a film," she said, "where they pulled this creature out of this guy's ear, and it made me really, really squirm. It was just so awful." And he said, "That was my grandpa. It was me. You didn't know that."
Oh, that's cool.
Tell me, John, I have a question for you. What do
Yeah,
you do?
I moderate focus groups for the entertainment industry, like pilots and, you know, series maintenance, stuff like that.
Good.
Yeah,
It sounds good.
it's good, and I love my show. I created the show because I love the business. So for me, it's been great. All right. Well, I've got another question for you here is I noticed that when I was researching you that you auditioned for Leonard Nimoy before Star Trek ever happened. Is that right? Had you
Yeah,
seen?
that is. Where did you get that from? That's interesting. I think it was a play. I know it was a play, but I think it was called No Exit, and I didn't know who he was. There were a couple of other people who were, I think, very well. I think Vic Morrow from
Wow.
Combat. I think he was part of the group. They had their own group, and I auditioned for a part, and they kept me. They didn't let me go after I was done, and they asked me to read with other people who are auditioning for other parts. So I stayed for a couple of hours. In fact, I was getting a little tired. They kept asking me to hang in there. I think it was the part of a priest, a gay priest. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Wow.
Yeah, but I auditioned, for at least a couple of hours, and they ended up using one of the guys in their little company, Leonard Nimoy, Vic Morrow, and there was another guy, and they ended up using him. So I really had no chance. I was just there to to read, but it was a good part, and I would have loved to have played it, but it didn't happen.
Unbelievable. Isn't that funny? So
And,
when,
and, you know, and you know, Leonard never, we never talked about it. We never mentioned it. Yeah.
oh, isn't that funny? Especially when you were there for like 2 hours. He
Oh yeah,
obviously
yeah.
knew.
I was at least 2 hours. It may have been longer.
Wow, isn't that funny that you guys never even brought it up, seeing
No.
each other on the set? Wow, what a small world. So did you people are always asking, are you still getting residuals from it? How did that work?
Yeah, the residuals are minuscule. I mean, it could be single digit.
Yeah, yeah.
They can be very small. Um, but when we did the series, Star Trek series, there was a finite number of residual payments.
Hmm.
Um, and there were six. You got six payments for any show that was rerun.
Interesting.
It was run six times. Then in the third season, there was a new contract that SAG had created that gave us 10 residuals. So at that juncture, our situation changed from 6 to 10. And then after the show was canceled, they wrote a new contract, and that was residuals ad infinitum. But they became increasingly smaller. So that literally, I don't think I ever got anything under $1. I did get residual payments depending on where it was shown, on what was the medium that it was shown on, but it could be anything from $3 or $4, to 20. It was that
Wow.
kind of thing.
How interesting. That really is. Were you shocked, I guess for lack of a better word, that it did end up going into reruns as strong as it did?
Well, we were told during this shooting how popular it was, and there was a groundswell of reaction
Hmm.
from fans who wanted to keep it on the air. Um, and as a matter of fact, between the first and second seasons, I wasn't on the first season.
Hmm.
I heard there was going to be for want of a better word, a picket line in front of NBC. So I wasn't yet on the show. I mean, I guess I had already filmed some of them, but we hadn't started showing them. So I went over to NBC, and sure enough, there's a group of fans holding picket signs, keep Star Trek on the air. So I had the opportunity to see that, and that was encouraging. But my personality and my way of looking at things is such that when we were canceled after the third season, I thought that was it.
Hmm.
I thought the fans' excitement, enthusiasm, and support was terrific, but we were a done deal. And as a matter of fact, five, next 5 years and next 4 years, there was absolutely nothing. It was very, very quiet.
Hmm.
Um, so there was no reason to believe that we were ever going to come back in any form. And then there started to be uh, rumors that they were coming up with a new Star Trek. And as a matter of fact, um, everybody got a letter from Gene Roddenberry saying, "We're coming back. Uh, Make sure that you get your waist down to the size it was before we were canceled." Except, who didn't get a letter? Me.
What?
Yeah, I didn't get a letter. So I called up Gene's office and I talked to Susan Sackett, who was the secretary, who guffawed and said, "No, you're just being paranoid, Walter. Of course, you got a letter too." And I said, "No, I did not get a letter." Well, as it turns out, I did not get a letter, and it was purposeful. It was not a mistake. It was not an error.
Hmm.
The reason is the series that they were bringing back was going to take place 5 years before our series took place.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
I am, I was, still am, 9 years older than the character. Okay,
Yeah.
and it was now 5 years after the fact.
Oh,
So I was now 19 years older than Chekov was supposed to be in the new series.
oh my gosh.
There ain't no way I can, play somebody who was 17. That's what it would have to have been. And he said that. And he said, he said, maybe we can have you back as Chekhov's father. And I said, okay, great. Hung up the phone. That was it. The end. Fini. Kaput. It's all over. Now, what do I do with the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Another phone call, I don't know, 6 months later, year later, whatever it was. Oh, we are coming back with Star Trek. You are involved. You are going to be a character. Chekhov is going to be in a character. Come in for a fitting. So I came in for the fitting. This is John. This is hand to God. They checked me. I said, "Well, you're the same size you were when we did the series. Congratulations. So far, you're the only one." I went home. The phone rang. Oh, we're canceled. We're not going to do the series after all.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
no, it was mind. It makes you crazy. So I thought, okay, that's it. Forget about it. Now what do I do? Well, Star Wars came out. Star Wars was this huge success.
Yeah.
Science fiction, outer space. Paramount, the top of this is again, hand to God. Top executives get together and say, what do we have that can compete with that? What was it? No, Star Trek. That's what it was. Come in for a fitting.
Oh my gosh.
So literally, John, after all of that, and was start and go at least 4 times, start and not go. When we were shooting, literally, it took me the second shot, not the first shot. The first shot was a pan, a master pan of the entire bridge, so that you got everybody in it at their consoles. I still didn't believe we were shooting Star Trek. They're going to cancel this. When we got to the second shot, was Kirk coming out of the lift and talking to, and Uhura, Chekov, and Sulu rush up to him, and they were setting up that shot with the lights and the cameras. Then I said, "This is happening. This is really get the first shot. Oh, we're still doing it. It's the second shot. We have a movie."
Wow, I mean, that's a crazy ride. Really. I mean, wow. So I mean, you never saw this thing happening. That's just incredible.
And I'm cynical by nature, so I generally look for the worst.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's amazing. By the way, did you bond with anyone from the cast? Like, did you feel close with anyone in particular or not?
Well, I got along well with Michelle.
Hmm.
Uh, I got along well with George. I got along well with DeForest.
Hmm.
DeForest was a really good guy. He was friends with Bill and Leonard. They hung out together, but he was also friendly with the rest of us.
Hmm.
Bill, considered us second-class citizens. So
Yeah.
it's not that he said insulting things, or he just ignored us. We just didn't exist. And Leonard was so into Spock that he was Spock regardless of whether he was on camera or not on camera.
Wow.
But we didn't talk to him, you know.
Wow.
But DeForest was great. Jimmy was very volatile, but on his good days was great, you know. So yeah, I got along with everybody else. George and I actually had a couple of dinners together.
Hmm. Oh, very nice. What, by the way, I was reading about James Doohan, but between this interview and the last, I was just curious, and I still don't really get why was he more volatile? Well, what do you think it was?
Jimmy,
Yeah.
just think it's personality.
Hmm.
I think in personality. I mean, he could be very generous. He could be very warm. In fact, we hung out at a couple of conventions together in England, so we got
Mhm.
along pretty well. It's just there were just times when he would get upset, and he. What I didn't know, what I didn't know about any of the other cast is that they held resentment for Bill because we didn't exchange thoughts about it. We all had the same resentment, but nobody knew about the others because we just didn't talk about it.
Hmm.
It was only until we started doing the movies that it became evident that we had mutually dissatisfied with our captain.
Right, right. Interesting. One other one, and then I'd like to kind of talk a little bit because I'm sure people are wondering what you're doing now. But Spectre of the Gun. I think that's an episode that always stands out to me with Chekhov because in essence you die, but one of the things I never felt any resolve. It starts up and you're on the bridge. Now you died, but you're on the bridge. And I get confused because in the episode, Spock creates like this grenade gas or something that's supposed to work to settle them down, your opponents, so to speak, but it doesn't. And so then my brain goes, well, then did Chekhov really die? Or, did any of that get resolved? Or was that just like, we don't know what to do, so we're just going to put you back on the bridge?
John, that's a very, very astute comment. In fact, the contradiction in the story, because
Hmm.
the story says that if you don't believe what's happening, then it's not happening. It's an illusion. It's only if you buy into it that it happened. Well, we didn't learn that until after Chekhov died. So he shouldn't have been alive at the end of the show.
Huh.
And for whatever self-destructive reason I had, I mentioned it to the editor that it was an inconsistency. I had already died, and I said, you can't bring him back because although it was an illusion, it wasn't an illusion when he died. He really died. And the editor took a moment and said, yeah, we know that, but screw it. So,
Okay.
and I guess they added a line on the bridge near the end where somebody says, the only thing Chekhov believed was the girl. It's the only thing he believed in, which is after the fact, after the story is told.
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't make any sense, but okay. I'm not going to fight it.
No, of course not. No. But that one always stood out to me. I mean, great episode for you in essence. It was kind of a cool moment. But it never, yeah, I always wondered that. So yeah, before I go on, because I do want to talk to you about, your career outside of Star Trek, because you were on a lot of shows. But just for the fans and everyone, what are you involved with now? Just out of curiosity, if anything.
Say that again.
What are you currently working on or are involved with at the moment?
Well, I'm working on a short film called Mr. Fleischman, and it's a festival film. It'll be about 25 minutes, and I'm really excited that juncture in my life, this um, see,
God
that's
bless.
you get excited, I sneeze.
Well, bless you.
um, it's about an old German guy who's a refugee from the camp, and he has encountered a SS officer
Hmm.
who killed his mother and father.
Oh, wow.
And the SS officer, you never see the SS officer, but he is murdered. And the police come and they're investigating, and they come to me. And that's what the story is about. About my recounting my experience, my denial of culpability initially, but later there is confession involved. It's done with a German accent, and I have some words in German which I am learning. I don't know the exact meaning of them. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, it's like nonsense,
Yeah.
because I don't know what the heck the words mean. I'm just learning these sounds. Um, but it's a it's a really stimulating project, and we have the personnel, we have the equipment, we have the location, we have everything. But guess what? We don't have. We don't have
Fine.
the money.
Exactly. Financing.
Not a lot of money.
Yeah.
Certainly by any films, the parameters of any film, this is a very modest amount of money. But we need
Mhm.
to raise it, so we're trying to raise the money. I'm hoping that we get the money. I'm getting to be an old son of a gun, and I wouldn't mind if this is my last shot. But I would like it to happen. So that's what we're doing. So we were rehearsing once or twice a week. Everything is in place. It's just the money. Um, I don't know, if anybody's watching this. I don't know exactly where they would go.
Hmm.
I'd maybe look up Mr. Fleischman, Fleischmann, because I think there's a couple of places on the internet that they can reach out to and contribute if they wanted to.
No, I think that's great. Sometimes there's a couple of things. There's one called Kickstarter, and there's
Yeah,
another one called GoFundMe that some of these projects go to. So maybe they're on one of those, you know?
they were. They didn't have much success
Ah,
on GoFundMe, so they're looking for other avenues. Anyway, we're
okay.
here to talk about Star Trek, so
Yeah,
let's.
yeah, yeah. No problem. Well, I'm glad. It sounds like a great project, and I'm not just saying that. It does. I could totally see you in the parts. I bet it would be great. So I'm going to cross my fingers that that happens for you.
Okay, it was
Um,
written for me. Okay.
oh, I could totally see why it would be. I mean, honestly, it's not like this like lawn shot where you go, oh, I can't see Walter Koenig in that. I can totally see you in that. So that's terrific. Um, well, great. I wish you the best of luck with that. So going back in your career, you had Alfred Hitchcock Presents. You did that. You did that. But am I right? You did that with James Caan?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I,
one of
I
my
did.
favorites.
We went to school together.
Huh.
You and I went to the neighborhood playhouse together. Um, yeah, his career diverged from mine. Became a movie star. Um, that was fun. He played the good guy. I played the bad guy, and the Hitchcock. Um, I got to hit him. In fact, I was supposed to miss. It was supposed to be one of these.
Yeah.
I was wearing this ring. Yeah,
Oh,
and
you're kidding. That ring right there for
yeah,
real.
yeah, and I hit him across the lips. And I was horrified. The shot was over my shoulder on him. And I was horrified that I had hit him. And I could see in his face that he didn't want me to stop. He wanted me to keep going.
Wow.
And he was taking that hit as part of his reaction to what was going on. Yeah. he did say one very interesting and cogent thing. He was definitely a working actor. He wasn't a totally a movie star yet.
Mhm.
He hadn't done Godfather, and he hadn't done the something story about the football player. I can't think of what his name.
Oh, the Brian Piccolo. The
The Brian Piccolo, yeah,
yeah,
he
the
hadn't done that. But he was definitely a guest star on a lot of television shows. And we went to lunch one day. This was at Universal, and went to lunch one day, and during the shoot, and we came out of the restaurant, and the AD, assistant director, was yelling to us from 50 yards away, "Hurry up, we need you!" And I started to run, and he grabbed me and said, "Stars don't run." Well, I knew one of us was going to become a star.
Wow. Was he a good guy?
He's a good guy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He had a funny comment. The four my cohorts. I was the gang leader. The cohorts were actors Zalman King and Tony Masanti and Mark Slade. They were my
Wow.
cohorts. They all went on to do series, which
Yeah.
is really interesting. They all had their own series. But we were sitting around, I guess, in wardrobe and talking about which one of us is the toughest guy. And Jimmy pointed to the very colorful sneakers that one of the other guys was wearing and said, he's got to be the toughest because anybody who wear those sneakers has got to be able to defend himself.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's how I've always pictured him. That's how I always found him so likable, even when he's, more of a bad guy. He has this, you just feel like he's got that every guy thing about him, where you can relate. I think that's pretty cool. That's awesome that you were able to be with him. Jesus, that's neat. You had a lot of great credits, by the way. Another one that was kind of odd, and I don't mean to bring Star Trek back that quick. It's not really that, but that Columbo episode that you did, Shatner's in the same episode.
Right. Who knew?
Yeah.
And you couldn't tell from the episode because he never talked to me.
Oh,
I mean, we weren't in a scene together, but we rode together in a car from one location to another, and yeah, no,
Wait, you mean you didn't talk in the car, even?
well, yeah, we weren't shooting; we were going from one location to another, and we
Huh.
sat next to each other. Didn't speak to me.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I didn't see that.
Okay, so but bear in mind, as difficult as it was, I mean, I didn't hate him or anything. I just accepted his circumstances. He's the star, uh, and same thing on our set, and I just accepted it. I was grateful that I had an opportunity to work, and the Columbo was came at a very opportune time because I hadn't worked in about a year,
Hmm.
and I was able to get my health insurance by
Oh,
doing the Columbo. Um, but I never slighted his talent. I
hmm.
mean, I always thought that he was very talented. He was the reason why Star Trek was picked up for a third season. That's my feeling,
Oh yeah.
ultimately, because he was an exceptional talent. A lot of leading men, particularly in those days, a lot of leading men were the thin-lipped, tough, hard as
Hmm.
nails character, and we didn't see much dimension. When Kirk's role, Bill's role was such that he had to play one episode where there was a woman inside of him
Hmm.
influencing his behavior. There was all sorts of interesting, challenging things that he did not shy from, that he gave his whole all to. I mean, he took off his shirt, of course,
Oh yeah.
as many times as they allowed him to. But he also played the nastiness of the character when that was the circumstance. He played all the different aspects of human beings when they were called for, and I credit him with that, and I respect him for that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What about Peter Falk? Did you get an opportunity to spend any time with Peter Falk of Columbo? Did
What's
you
that?
did you get any time to spend with Peter Falk on
No,
Columbo?
no, 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 no. We rehearsed. I learned something from Peter Falk. We rehearsed some. I played this police sergeant, and I'm describing what I thought how the crime took place, and and at one point in it, I do this with my fingers, making me believe it was a gun. And I said, and then he pulled a gun, and we did this, rehearsed this for a long time, mainly because they were setting up the camera, not because of the actors, but they're setting up the camera. And Falk was watching it. What I learned was, you got a special little moment that you have like this. Don't give it away because it's just unusual enough to become it's in ultimately initially it's interesting, but ultimately it can be received as being a gimmick or something. Mm-hmm. And Falk saw me do this 5 or 6 times, and he turned to the AD, turned to the director and said, "Don't have him do that." So I learned if I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary, I should save it for the shot and not do it in the rehearsal.
Very interesting. Hey, good piece of advice actually there for any actor. I like it.
Yeah.
I like that one. Another one that I spotted, and I'm thinking just how interesting that Gene Roddenberry was involved, is the Quester tapes.
It was the show.
Yeah, I know. And I'm like, and you were on that too, which by the way, also saw Mike Farrell, who I've had on the show here, great guy.
Right? I like Farrell. We got along well. We we haven't kept in touch, but we had a good relationship during the shoot. I thoroughly enjoyed. Bright guy. His politics are similar to mine.
Mm-hmm.
I had a good time with him. It was a nothing role. It was a give me role. Roddenberry was told that I was hurting financially. Somebody told him. I did not call him, but somebody told him I was hurting financially. So he stuck me in this role, which was a very, very secondary role. But it was 2 weeks' work.
Oh,
and yeah, you can't complain about that.
Mm-mm.
No, that was a nice experience. Everybody was pleasant on that show. And unfortunately, behind the scenes, Gene was having problems with whoever was in charge, whether it was the studio or the network or whoever it was. Robert Foxworth, God, I remember that name, played the robot, the non-human character, and took the place of Spock on Star Trek. In fact, Gene wanted Leonard for that role.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for the robot. I don't know what the ramifications were, but it didn't work out. But in any case, yeah, that was purely a gimme. It was charity, and I appreciated it.
I love hearing that, though. Anytime that I hear about someone like Gene Roddenberry or another fellow actor that says, hire him or hire her, I love that they remember and they try, they actually try. And I think that's just great. So that's cool to hear. You were in a lot of good stuff, by the way. I'm Walter. I Spy. I mean, I Spy with Robert Culp and Bill Cosby.
Yeah. That was fun. Initially, I read for the, or they wanted me to read for the principal juvenile, who was a prince, a Middle Eastern prince or something, And I told them, and they wanted me to have an aristocratic English accent. And at that time, I didn't know how to do it. And I said, I can't do that accent. So then they had me read for the second guy who was a musician in Vegas. And I was the bad, so I ended up playing the bad guy. They got a kid to play the prince who told them that he could get on a surfboard and behind a motorboat and water ski. And,
Oh,
he told them that, see, I couldn't have done it either. But this kid told him he could, and they were furious because he kept falling off. So they started, Culp and Cosby started ad-libbing little demeaning comments about him into the script.
oh, gee.
So,
Wow.
so thank God I didn't get that part.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, because there's that old line, with every actor. It's like, hey, can you ride a horse? Sure, I can, you know, and that's
I
the
did,
epitome.
I did have that problem on an Ironsides. I did an Ironsides where they asked me if I could ride a motorcycle, and I said, yeah. Well, I had ridden a motorcycle. The one they gave me, though, um, I, I pushed down on the pedal, and
Yeah.
I couldn't use enough force to get it started. You know, it wasn't one where you just turn a key the way they are now.
Right. You gotta
But
like
I
get
pushed
down on
down,
it. Yeah.
and I pounded down on the freaking thing, and I couldn't get it to start. So what we ended up doing is we changed the location. We started that I climbed on top of a hill.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and I faked this starting, and then they post production they added the motor sound, and I just glided down the hill without the motor on.
Oh, is that funny? And the best part is you actually knew how to ride a motorcycle.
I've ridden a motorcycle,
Oh,
couldn't
is
get it
that
started.
that's funny. By the way, another, there's an iconic one, Raymond Burr. I mean, come on. What was that like for you to be? Well, was he on that? I haven't seen that episode. Was he on in your portion of the show?
No, I did not work with Raymond Burr. I did work with Theodore Bikel. You
Hmm.
remember Theodore Bikel?
Yes.
He
Yeah.
was a folk singer and a musician. Now, my little story with Theodore Bikel is, for a time, he was president of the stage union, Equity. And there was a lot of little theater in Los Angeles. When I mean little, 90 seats or less.
Yeah. Yep.
And we weren't charging admission. We had a fishbowl. And if you wanted to contribute, that would be great. The bowl was there. But we didn't. And Equity, the union, wanted us to charge. In New York, they were charging
Hmm.
for small productions, but we didn't charge. And so Bikel came out to Los Angeles, and he had a meeting. And I was one of the, for want of a better word, one of the executives of the company, the theater company that I was involved in.
Yeah.
So I represented them at this meeting. And I had gotten up and I had said that uh, regardless of the fact we're not getting paid, it is a learning experience. For example, we're doing a play now at that time called La Ronde, which was a comedy. And I said, it's invaluable to helping us for timing, to know where the laughs are,
Hmm.
they have an audience reaction. So that was my contribution to the conversation. And so at the end of it, Peter Bikel got up and said, "Okay, I want to summarize what everybody said. Uh, you need the free theater so you can get your little giggles." And I jumped up and I said, "Mr. Bikel, that's not a summary, that's an editorial." So I'm standing there with him at the set of Ironsides, and I'm holding a knife at his throat as they're setting, honestly, as they're setting up the shot. You know, they're getting the lighting. And I said, "Do you remember coming out, Mr. McGill?" And I reiterated the conversation, just sort of,
That's hysterical. Oh,
yeah.
I love that. Another one. I mean, these are iconic shows. Gidget, you were the fiance in Gidget, is that right?
Yeah, I have a story about that.
Oh, geez.
So Sally Fields was great, you know, very talented, extremely talented.
Yes.
People did love her. You know, she mentioned that at the awards, and it's true, they did love her. She was a terrific actress. Still is. I think she's still with us.
She is still with us, and I agree with you. Amazing actress.
Okay, so I was cast as a Swede, a Swedish businessman who comes to fetch his fiancee who's staying with Gidget. And the first thing that happened was the girl who's playing my fiance couldn't do a Swedish accent. You know, she could do Zsa Gabor, which was Hungarian. So they came to me and said, "Look, can you do a Hungarian accent?" I said, "No, I was cast to do a Swedish accent." So they said, "Okay." So I don't know what happened with her. She still did it. She still did it. I think maybe she still did use the Zsa Gabor accent. But the moment I'm going to relate is, so I've come to take her home, you know, and she's so spoiled by living in the States and going to the beach and hanging out with Gidget's friends that she says, "No, I'm not going home." And I and so I walk out of the room and I'm in the kitchen with Gidget and we're washing the dishes, you know, and
Yeah.
she comes storming in, very muffed, very upset, and supposed to take the dish out of my hand and throw it on the floor. She took the dish out of my hand and threw it and hit me in the groin. The pain was excruciating. And to make it worse, I hear the director saying, "Don't stop, don't stop, keep going." I said, "Don't stop." And I stopped.
Oh, oh, that is so funny. Wow. Right in the groin. Oh my gosh. Did the other people crack up, by the way? I mean, how could you not lose
No,
it
I
after a while?
getting cracked up. I thought they were just wincing in pain.
Oh, I love it. Walter, that's a great one. Okay. Sorry, I had to catch myself. The other one was Mannix, which is Mike Connors. I've only had like one other person I think that was on Mannix actually. Did you happen to work with Mike?
I think I did. I'm not sure. I
Mhm.
know it was a therapy scene where we were all,
Hmm.
you know, there were a couple of therapy groups at that time that had kind of far out ideas.
Mhm.
One was that if everybody screamed in unison, it would cure you of what was bothering you. Leonard Nimoy, in fact, had attached himself to one of these groups, which gave it validity
Hmm.
and made it was taken seriously. Um, the director, I had worked for the director before. I had done a couple of Mr. Novak shows, which he was the director on. In fact, the
Mhm.
one in which I played the Russian student who was defecting from the Soviet Union, and he cast me in the Mannix.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that was fun. I had a good time doing that.
Yeah, but no, Mike might have been there. He might not have been there. Who knows? Yeah, I got you. So you also, by the way, I meant to tell you yesterday, and I haven't released this episode yet because I literally just did it yesterday. I had the cast of Family on, and I never got a chance to ask them, but I noticed that I was doing a lot of research for the show. family, and I saw that you wrote one of the episodes.
Well,
Do you
you
remember?
want to hear that story?
Oh
That's
yeah, sure, sure. I can see it in your face. Yeah.
so the way it works when you pitch when you try to sell a story to television is you go in and you do a verbal pitch. Okay, tell them what the story is going to be about. If they like your pitch, then they give you money to write an outline.
Hmm.
You don't get paid for the pitch. At least this was the time when this is how it was when I was writing.
Yeah.
So I wrote the verbal outline. They liked it. They paid me. They sent me on to do the first draft of the screenplay. Once you're committed to the first draft, then you get paid the rest of the money. Then you do the first draft, and then if they want a second draft, which they usually do, you do a second draft. But it's already guaranteed. The money is guaranteed at that point. So I pitched 3 stories, and the guy I pitched them to liked them all. He thought they were all really good. No, strike that. That's another script. That's another story. No, okay. I came in, I pitched the story. There was 2 women producers and a story editor. They really liked it. They really liked it. It was, oh God, I'm getting so confused. Hold on a second.
Go ahead. Don't worry. I understand.
Okay. Strike all of that. That's
okay.
two different shows. One is The Incredible Hulk, which is a story in itself that I pitched for, and okay, Family. Family came about because I had written a script for a show called Whatever Happened to the Class of '65.
Yes, big cast, by the way. Annette O'Toole, John Rubenstein, Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus.
And they liked the pitch. They gave me the assignment. I wrote it. They shot it. It was on the air. Mm-hmm. Everybody was pleased. It was just me and the producer on the Class of '65. There was no story editor.
Wow.
So I did all the rewrites. And because it was the first thing I'd written for television, I didn't know how to gauge how long it should be. So I wrote a 90-page story for a 52-page hour. Yeah. I had to cut about almost 40 pages out of my script.
Wow.
And I didn't think it was possible, but I did it. But it caused me to rewrite it about 6 times. And I was so tired of writing it, rewriting and cutting and cutting. So when they came to me the 7th time and said, we still need to take out a couple of pages, I said, I'm done. I said, you have from me what my obligation is according to contract, and I ain't doing no more.
Wow.
So out of 100%, 99% is mine. 1% is the producer.
Wow.
With half a page that he rewrote.
Huh.
But it went on in another, and so I had no complaint. I watched it. Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote. The girl who played the lead, I knew there's a connection. The girl who played the lead in this episode was one of the leads on Family. She was the older sister on Family. She liked my writing a lot. She thought I wrote well for women, is what so she went to the producers of Family and said, you should bring him in to pitch some story, because he wrote very well for the character I played.
Is that Meredith Baxter Birney?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember names, but you're right, Meredith Baxter. And I found this out subsequently. I don't remember how, but I did. In any case, so I pitched several stories. They liked them all. They gave me an assignment. I wrote it. I wrote this. You write an A story and a B story. Mm-hmm. The B story was about a garage sale, And the A story, it was I don't remember what it was, but it was pretty controversial. But
Mhm.
they really liked it. They loved it. They said. So I'm feeling good about it. I got paid. I turn it in. I tune into it, and there's nothing in it that I wrote. Absolutely nothing. So why did they give me the go ahead? Why did they pay me and give me credit? And there's nothing in it that I wrote.
Wow.
I was really I was really felt driven to find out what the hell happened.
Yeah.
So I went to 20th Century Fox and I got on a lot and I got over to their bungalow or wherever their office was. And I found the producer was he and his wife were the producers. And he was coming out of the office. And I went up to him and he had a big smile on his face. Hi, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing okay, but can you please explain to me? I mean, there was nothing belligerent about my attitude. How could there be? Um, well, there could be, I suppose, but I was just so curious. So why is it that after, we went through this whole thing, I wrote the script, you cleared it, you gave me an okay, that when you actually put it on the air, you totally changed it.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he looked at the ground and he had nothing to say.
Oh my gosh.
To this day, I can only speculate. I can only speculate. They get paid if they do rewrites.
Hmm.
And if they do a whole rewrite and it's their show, and they've gotten such great reviews all along the line that it was very creatively done. The cast was terrific.
Yeah,
Sadie Thompson, I think, was the name.
that
Was
is
the
correct. James
yeah,
Broderick. Yep.
yeah. And matter of fact, I was at a convention less than a year ago, and the young girl, the youngest daughter, I can't think of her name now, who
Oh,
had a
Christy McNichol.
yes, she had a big career. I went up to her, and first thing is she recognized me from Star Trek. I said, "No, no, I'm not talking about Star Trek. I want to talk about your show." And do you know why they totally rewrote the episode that I had written? She had no idea. She knew nothing about it. She was pleasant, but she knew nothing. Anyway, I I had three or four situations like that in a row as a writer that was so befuddling to me. I just couldn't understand. Nobody had an explanation as to why they didn't use my work. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, were they being polite? Did they think it was really awful? No, I don't believe that.
Mm-mm.
Um, it had to do with personal stuff, and I didn't understand it. With the Hulk is an interesting
Yeah,
story.
let's hear the Incredible Hulk one. This is the show with Bill Bixby, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Bill Bixby. Um, so I went in and I pitched some stories to women producers. Uh, I had gotten an idea from a newspaper article I had read about an isolated community in New Jersey that was made up of Native Americans and African Americans that were isolated from the larger context. Um, they lived in a secluded environment. This is a true story. And
Wow.
that's where I got my idea. So I put the Hulk as appearing in this community who is isolated. And one faction in the community thinks he's a representative of a positive deity, and the other faction thinks it's the devil incarnate.
It's a cool story. I love it.
Yeah, it is a cool story.
Yeah.
And they liked it. Now, early on in the pitch, I must say this part, give them credit. They said something about Shirley Jackson, and they were referring to Shirley Jackson, the writer who wrote a story that uh, was developed into a screenplay about a community that once a year chooses somebody to stone, and
Hmm.
they kill them. And that was part of their story. My story had nothing to do with that, other than that it was an isolated community. And I think they mentioned that in the conversation. They just brought it up.
Yeah.
Okay. But it was not that story. There was no stoning. It was about an isolated community, but that's where the similarity ended. So I pitch it, they buy the pitch. I write the outline. Outline is based on my pitch. They say, good, it's good. In fact, my hand to God, John, they asked me if I'd be interested in becoming a story editor.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
the story editor is moving up. And I didn't even think about it. The idea of sitting 8 or 9 hours in an office every day, typing with one finger, because that's what I did. It was beyond comprehension. I was pretty broke, but I just couldn't conceive of that.
Yeah.
So, thank you, but no. So then I wrote the story outline. They bought it. They gave me the go ahead to do the first draft. This first draft was totally reflective of the pitch of the pitch that I had done. So they bought the outline. They gave me first draft.
Hmm.
I wrote it, and as I say, the first draft was the outline elaborated.
Yeah.
I get a call. We're gonna from one of the two women. Now, bear in mind, these women were making $300,000 a season.
Wow.
300 freaking $1,000.
At that time too.
Yeah, at that time. And I think that works into this because I get this call. We're going to do your story, but our executive producer, who had been away shooting a 2-hour Hulk, has a couple of questions that he wants to ask you. So I said, okay. So I come in. He says, we're going to do your story. He's a big, tall, rough guy. And he says, we just can't do it we can't place it in the United States. There's no community like that where they, so I said, I got it out of a newspaper. He says, no. We're going to put it in Mexico. I said, I can't write it if you put it in Mexico. I said, because then you're making a comment about the Mexican people, that they're uneducated and they're stupid and and they're superstitious. It becomes an ethnic story because you're using Mexicans only.
It kills the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he says, well, we can't do it that way. I said, well, and he turns to the two ladies and says, who gave him this assignment anyway? He's trying to find somebody to find guilt. And they said, well, we thought it was going to be like Shirley Jackson's story. No, it was never going to be that. They bought my outline. They took out my outline and they compared it to the first draft. They would have seen that it was the same story.
Yep.
So he said, well, you either put it in Mexico or we don't do it. And I said, where's my hat? Thank you. Goodbye. And I left. And that was the end of that.
Wow. Wow.
The postscript is they paid me anyway, which I was totally surprised about. They never used my name because they never used the story. But 3 or 4 of those things happened in a row. And as the last one, I'm called in to not to do a pitch, but to hear about a new series about a dog. And it was a dog, it was a very anthropomorphic dog, you know. He did everything but leer, you know. A young woman walks into the room.
Oh, jeez.
And this guy is acting it out. The producer is acting. And there's like 4 writers. There's 4 writers. I'm there with my notepad, and they're there. And it's incredibly stupid.
He's acting it out is the best part too.
This dog is everything but circumcised. So after that, I said, this is not the world for me. I mean, I see everybody else writing like mad, taking notes. And he's up on the table. I swear to you, up on his floor, on his hind leg, on his all fours. Ooh, give me the will. Ooh.
Oh my gosh, is that funny?
So I never came back, and I called the writer's agent and I said, I'm done. The only thing I'll do is I'll write on speculation. I'll write movies of the week, which I did. I had a couple of options. I actually made about $100,000 on a couple of options.
Wow.
What?
I said, wow, that's awesome.
Cher, Julie Christie, and the girl, the blonde from Cagney and Lacey.
Oh, Sharon Gless.
Yeah, they all wanted to do the female lead in this screenplay that I wrote.
Wow.
And my producer stabbed me in the back. He made a deal with NBC. Well, the first time we went in, because this is again weird. I've got to tell you this because it's weird. First time we went in with the script, and NBC read it and they liked it. This was before these women were involved, and they wanted to do it as a movie of the week, but they wanted to talk about changes. I said, okay. So I went in with the producer, and the lieutenant, they were lieutenants, the guys who were in charge of these movies of the week, was in with the boss of the movies of the week, who's the guy who was incidentally in control of Star Trek for the network. He was the main macher there. So we could hear through the door the main guy screaming at the lieutenant, about something.
Oh my gosh.
So we tiptoed away and we sat in the lieutenant's office waiting for him to get through with the head of the division. And the lieutenant, he comes into his office, and we're sitting there. And I starts by saying, it's a beautiful office. I love the antique furniture. This is, yeah. So do those things and we'll talk again. Do what things? He hadn't said anything. It was all in his head. He never articulated one freaking thing for us to do. And I'm looking at my producer and he's going, don't say anything. So I walk out and I said, what just happened? What happened? He said, I don't know. I'll find out. So that was the first part of it. Then he sold me out. He made a separate deal with the network to bring in another writer.
Oh,
my contract stipulated that I had first refusal on rewrites. It stipulated that. So, and he didn't tell me. So I'm waiting 6 months for the option to expire because NBC had the option. And the day before it expired, I called up my producer and I said, it's expiring tomorrow. What's going to happen? He said, oh, that's when he told me. He says, oh, they want to re-option, but they want to bring in another writer. I said, no, they can't do that. And he said, yeah, but they're going to shoot it if they bring in another writer. I said, they cannot do that. I'm putting you on notice. I'm putting the network on notice. You go forward, and I have an ironclad contract here. I'm going to bring suit against you guys. Well, NBC didn't want any suits. They just passed. Okay. So then I got my time frames mixed up. Then it was like a year later that I got a call from the agent that I had at the time saying, how badly do you want this done? And then he mentioned the 3 actresses who wanted to do it.
Yeah, all top actresses, by the way, like top.
Yeah, yeah. And I said, okay, okay. I'm not in love with that project anymore. I have a little distance now. But this is the deal. For every portion of credit I lose, if I have to share story credit, I get another $5,000. If I lose story credit, I get $10,000. If I lose part of the screen credit, I get another $5,000. If I lose screen credit, I get another $5,000. So I had it worked out that I was going to get, that $20,000, which was important to me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they said, okay. They hired another writer. NBC didn't like it, didn't like what he, and they canceled the whole project.
Oh, geez. After all of that,
Yeah, they didn't do it.
oh my gosh, that must have been a hell of a project too. When you have Cher, Julie Christie, and Sharon Gless interested, it's
Yeah,
a good project.
yeah, yeah. It was. It was really a good project. It was a psychological thriller,
Hmm.
and they were going to be the principal character. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
That's my writing life as as a television writer.
Yeah, well, you know what? As you know, I have a background as an actor, I've been in the business. It's a it's a weird business. That's all I can say. It's just a weird business, and there's a lot of egos and all that stuff. Let's just if you have a moment, I wanted to go back just to when you first started. I mean, you went to, I'm originally from Wisconsin, so I grew up in Milwaukee, and I noticed that you had gone to Grinnell College in Iowa. And when I look back, though, I was so surprised because it said you actually were there for pre-med. Is that right?
Well, I was in a normal public high school. I would have been at least the middle of the class student. I would have in private high school, very accelerated academic environment. I was I was also in the middle of the class, but in a class of 80, that put me like 45th, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and I felt very, very inadequate. I was in with very bright students. Um, 10 years before, 10 years after me, Nick Meyer graduated from the same high school.
From
Nick
Grinnell.
Meyer, the director of Star Trek II and Star Trek Star Trek 4, and Star Trek 6, I
Oh,
think.
how crazy.
Yeah. And 10 years after him, his name was either Epstein or something like that, graduated from the same school and became second in command of Paramount, and then became second in command of Disney.
Oh, wow.
And in a class that graduates 80 students, you know.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. So I, I wasn't going to apply to schools like Harvard or Yale, and I'll never get in. Grinnell I thought, was a middle of the road school. Actually, it was on the higher end. I didn't realize that it was on the higher end. And they accepted me. And I, I got accepted by two or three schools. And I thought, different environment, that different kind of living style, this could be good. I could learn something from this experience. Well, I did okay. I went there for 2 years. I was a pre-med student, which was a terrible mistake. I have no, I have no capacity for physical sciences.
Hmm.
It just doesn't work. In fact, one of the prerequisites was a math course, which, if I wasn't good in physical sciences, I was really terrible in math. And so I took it my freshman year. And the way the professor had it worked out is, the end of each class, he gave you a problem to solve. And you had to stay until you figured out the problem. I
Oh,
was no 2 days in a row. I was still sitting there when the next class came in.
right. I know what you mean.
So after 2 days, I went up to him and said, I'm just not, I'm not ready for this. I'm not available intellectually. and, so, and then that was a very rural environment.
Hmm.
Uh, it was during a time, this was 1954 to 56. The men and the women were separated, not only in different buildings, but different parts of the campus.
Wow.
And I never dated. I never had one date. Um, and and then things happened. I was homesick, and I did this. I did the lead in the freshman school play, and not one of the students in my dormitory came to see it.
Oh, jeez.
I had nobody was interested in the things that I was interested in. I got a big fight with the halfback on the football team. He punched me in the jaw, and
Wow.
yeah, and I didn't retaliate the way I should have, and just it's all my life it's bothered me that I didn't retaliate, even though he was the football halfback. Anyway, the irony is now there is an irony, John, and
Okay.
it's a beautiful irony. It's a beautiful irony. So I left there with my tail between my legs. I went to UCLA, graduated from UCLA, was an A student in psychology. All my classes, I was A student.
Wow.
Dean's List at UCLA. Made no friends there. Didn't date there. Had one friend that I preserved a relationship with over 4 decades. But anyway, years and years go by, and then I get a call from Grinnell. This is 30 years after the fact.
Wow.
Would I come back and host Science Day at Grinnell? They've erected a new science building, and they would like me to host it. So I said, how much? And they gave me a really significant amount of money. And we hosted it. I hosted it in the gym. 700 students. They're all science students. I mean, it was a captive audience of science students. I could really do no wrong. And when Sarah, what was her last name? The one who ran for vice president.
Sarah Palin.
Sarah Palin. And this was just when they were running. And one of the awards I had to give was to one of the graduate students who was involved in determining the age of the human race. Carbon dating, whatever it was.
Yeah, yeah.
And she had been on the team that had made that discovery. So, and I had a monitor with all the things they wanted me to say. So I got to that, and I improvised, giving her this wonderful student. And I said, and I turned and I said to the audience, "In your face, Sarah Palin," and they went crazy. They just applauded and screamed. I've never gotten that kind of applause anywhere.
Wow.
So it was rewarding on many levels, And then they wanted to do a tape of the whole thing and sell it in their commissary. I said, well, that's going to cost you extra. So they paid me additional money. So that's my Grinnell story. And now Grinnell went through different ramifications. It started out as a Calvinist school where Vespers was mandatory. By the time I got there, it was no longer mandatory. There were 50 Jews in the school. I was one of the 50 Jews. And wouldn't you know, it was one of the other Jews who was stealing money from everybody.
Jeez. Oh,
We caught him. Um, but what was I going to say?
you were
I
saying, yeah, where it's gone from Vespers to then to where it is now as
What?
a school. You were saying it was at one point it was Calvinist and Vespers, and
Oh
then
yeah,
it was
yeah,
there,
yeah.
and then
Then
yeah.
it became a very liberal school, very progressive school in the 70s. Time magazine wrote it up as a school where young female students marched naked across the campus. Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah, they marched naked in protest of the Vietnam War or something. Uh, and then I just recently saw that it was listed among the top 50 academic institutions in the country. You know,
Wow.
that's Harvard, Yale,
Hmm.
Stanford, MIT, all
Yeah.
those. It's listed. It was listed among those. So it has a very distinguished, if variegated, history,
Hmm.
and it's interesting to see.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's awesome that what a like wonderful experience to go back 30 years later, and not only that, you're opening the science building. I love that. It just shows you never know where you're going, you know? That's great. Hey, by the way, UCLA, you go for psychology, but is that if I'm getting this right, isn't that also though where someone kind of tweaked you to say, you should be an actor? Is that
Yeah,
is that
I
right?
took one acting course as a diversion because I knew I had done it before. I'd done it at Grinnell. I had done it a couple of times at my high school, even though I was a sluggish student. Uh,
Hmm.
I was, when I did the lead in the sophomore year in a play in high school, I became very popular. And all of a sudden, even the girls were looking at me, you know.
Hmm.
I had a girlfriend as a consequence. I discovered that as backward as I was socially, I just had to do plays and everything changed. They would
Yep.
knock on my door, which was really amazing. It took me a long time to get used to that. Anyway, yeah. So that what was
Well, what happened at UCLA that
oh
suddenly it
right.
was like, hey, you should be an actor?
So I was a psychology major, but I took one course in the theater arts department. Um, and I had a professor named Arthur Friedman, who was very supportive. He thought I was very good. And my father had just passed away, and I didn't have a great sense of direction. I didn't know what I wanted to do as I was getting close to graduating. And he suggested that I become an actor. And Art Friedman suggested that I go to the neighborhood playhouse, which he represented on the West Coast.
Hmm.
And uh, because I had mixed feelings about psychology, which I still do. It's not an absolute science, you know. It's a social science, and there's no way to prove anything. And all of these psychological terms, just people's imagination at work, as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
Um, in fact, I took one course called Schools of Psychology, and there's like four or five schools that are totally different from each other. So who are you to believe? You know,
Right.
here I had somebody who's really was so reinforcing. Um, so I said, okay. He wrote the letter. They accepted me, and that's where I met James Caan, Dabney Coleman, Chris Lloyd,
Wow.
Jessica Walter, and then Elizabeth Ashley and Brenda Vaccaro, who also became movie stars for a while.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, you were in class with all of them?
yes,
That's
Chris
amazing.
Lloyd. Chris Lloyd was my best friend. I mean, he thought I was funny. He was always cracking up. Um, yeah, so it's kind of strange how things work out, ultimately.
Yeah. Did you, by the way, all of those people that you just mentioned, were they all pretty much like, who they are today, even back then? Or did they change, do you think they changed quite a bit?
Well, first of all, Jimmy and Dabney are gone.
Right.
And Dabney,
Just recently, really. I mean, within, not that long ago.
Chris Lloyd, began to do stuff when we were in school. We were doing Arthur Miller, and he was going to do. So we got along great, and I never talked to him about it, but when he played Reverend Jim on Taxi,
Yep.
they had to have extrapolated his personal history because he came from enormous wealth. I mean, he played this guy, who was kind of like a bum, and and even at the Playhouse, he came to school in torn clothes. He had an MG that he parked in the red every day, and he didn't care about it. He had a gorgeous wife. Ultimately they separated. They got divorced, but he had all these trappings that nobody knew about unless you saw him after school. He invited me to his country home. He had an organ that was 2 stories high.
Wow.
An elevator in his house for the servants.
I had no idea he was that wealthy. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah. So we resumed the friendship for a while. Um, for a while we resumed, and I see him occasionally at conventions. Jessica passed away, which was a shame. Jessica had a had a line I will never forget. I told you that I was socially a bit withdrawn.
Uh-huh.
In fact, she played my wife in a play at the neighborhood playhouse. And she came up to me one day and she said, Walter, I don't know why you're so shy. I could go for you if you were taller.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Did were you, I mean, did when you're in that situation with a group like that, are you all kind of like, are you, like Brenda Vaccaro and Jessica Walters and James Caan, Dabney, are you guys daily, like just always together, working on scenes and things like that?
No, no. I think Jimmy and Dabney hung out together. I had a couple of people that I hung out with, um, but not like on a. Well, yeah, there was one guy actually moved in with me and another actor because we couldn't. We needed to share the rent,
Hmm.
and he was a good friend. I liked him a lot. Um, we uh, we auditioned for the Actors Studio together, and well, audition is a very loose term. Um, we had a scene from a play called The Rope that Alfred Hitchcock uh, directed, and it was with I think it was with Dean Stockwell, and it's about two guys who kill a third guy.
Yep.
He's in a trunk, you know.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was we were going to do that scene. So we got an audition time, and I just wanted to relax before we started the scene. So I was setting up the chairs and the table, and I got them all set up, and I stepped off the stage, as did the other actor. And then we came back on to start the scene, and Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler and said, "Thank you very much." And that was it. We never got to do the scene. They started timing us from the moment we started setting up the stage.
You have to be kidding me.
No, we spent weeks doing this, and that was the end. That was the end of it. Um,
Oh, wow. I didn't
I
whoa.
was so upset. I was so upset. The postscript is that my partner, years later, did get accepted at the actor studio. So, yeah, he never had a career, but he did. He was a student of the actor studio.
Very cool. I've got for my final question for you.
Hmm.
I was curious. We talked a little in the first interview about your father, and how how he would have felt with Chekhov and that. What did your father want you to become? What was his hope for you?
Well, he was so much older than I was. Um, he was 40 years older. He was a European, an Eastern European. He didn't assimilate very well. There's a lot about him that was still from the old country. He never understood baseball, for example. He didn't understand the rules or anything. Um, I think I told you last time, I don't know for a fact, but I think I told you that the last time I saw him, he said to me, and he had just seen me in a play, and
Hmm.
he said, whether you become an actor as an avocation or as a vocation. And that was amazing to me. So we had never discussed anything like that. And he was articulating the possibility of my becoming a professional actor. And that was astonishing to me. And he literally fell asleep after saying those words. So that was the last thing I heard him say before he fell asleep.
Wow.
Uh, and so when the time came with Arthur Friedman to make a decision as to whether I would become an actor or not, I brought forth those words that my father had said to me as confirmation that it could be a reality. And I used it in after the fact to make that decision. But I don't think we ever talked about stuff like that. I mean, I think he always had. I mean, they always took me to the theater.
Hmm.
Um, Nobody in my neighborhood went to the theater. But I went to see. Uh, I saw Charles Boyer in a play. I saw. Um, um, I don't think I saw Gloria Swanson, but I saw another very famous actress. I saw, yeah, I saw a bunch of plays with really Melvin Douglas.
Hmm.
Um,
Lynn Fontaine?
no, no,
Okay.
E.G. Marshall.
Mm.
Um, so I mean, it didn't. It didn't provoke me to think about acting as a career, but
Hmm.
I know that they enjoyed it. They enjoyed going to the theater. So I know that he would have been okay with it. And I regret terribly that he didn't get to see me play Chekhov.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I don't know. He was a businessman, but he would have. I'm sure he would have preferred. He played the flute, sort of. Once in a while, he took it out and played it. So I think at heart, he could have been a performer.
That's pretty neat. Did you and your mom ever talk about like, you know, the fact that you had gotten the part of Chekhov and what your father would have, you know, thought of it at that time? Anything like that?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. It was my father passed away in 1956. I didn't get to play Chekhov until 1967.
Hmm.
11 years. It's a long time to go by.
It is. It is. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. That's about in fact my dad passed roughly about that amount of time. Uh I think it's been 11 or 12 years. I'd have to get that on the head. My mother will end up listening to this and she'll say you should have known that. But yeah, so I know what you mean. It is an amount of time and yeah, that goes by. Very interesting. Very interesting. It really is. I find that so interesting. It's always amazing how that affects our lives and stuff like that. Um, well, listen, Walter, I think we covered so much. It's just been such a pleasure. I just cannot thank you enough. I've just enjoyed the whole thing. So
I
thanks
just
for
want to say one more thing. If
sure.
if your fans would like some permanent record of what we were talking about, I've written two autobiographies. The,
Great.
the, the second one includes the first one. So I would recommend them, and it would be more accessible. It's called Beaming Up and Getting Off. So, so you can find that. It's in bookstores and it's on the internet. It's available.
I'm glad that you said that. Do you have any personal appearances coming up at any shows, by the way?
I do. I do. Let's see. In April, I'm going to be in Seattle at the end of the month. In in June, I'm going to be in Huntsville, Alabama, on the weekend of the 20th, and in Buffalo, New York, on the weekend of the 27th. Um, in August, I'm going to be in Vegas at Creation Convention.
Oh.
It's the second Friday in August. In September, I'm going to be in Kingsport, Tennessee, and the first weekend in September. So I have that.
You have so much on the books. That is terrific. And I'll be releasing this before all of them so that people will get a chance to take that in. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Great.
Awesome. And I'm glad that you mentioned your books, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Because people always want to know that stuff. So yeah. Thanks a bunch though. Seriously, just thank you, Total pleasure. Just been a blast.
Thank you, John. Take
All right.
care.
I'll see ya. Hope you enjoyed the interview. Please don't forget to hit the subscription button and also hit the notification bell right after that so that you get notified whenever I have a new episode. And be sure to check out some of my other interviews. Henry Winkler, Jerry Mathers, Angela Cartwright, Shelley Fabre. It goes on and on. They're so great. Enjoy.